Television is an extraordinary technology that can educate people, bring this world together, and yet it's been prostituted by commercials, by people who own it, who only want to use it for money.
The 2020 Bernie Sanders campaign will be remembered for its passionate supporters.
We are here at Frank and Pierce University in the snow, happily, for Bernie. All for Bern.
It's progressive politics.
People are standing up for justice. That is what this campaign is about.
The surprise victories.
NBC News projects Bernie Sanders, the winner in Nevada. Brand new breaking news numbers.
And the absolute disgust of the mainstream media.
No other candidate has anything like this sort of digital brown shirt brigade.
Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl.
Can you explain why you're still in the race?
He saw nowhere near that level of support.
Don't get your hopes up on Bernie yet.
Bernie, you're full of it.
Don't come here and dream of your violent overthrow of America.
The abuse that we have all been subjected to by Bernie Bros.
Bernie Bros, right?
The corporate media is there to further the agenda of the establishment.
Ran by billionaires and hosted by millionaires.
There is real concern right now that Bernie Sanders is so far ahead in the lead.
Democrats need to sober up and figure out what the hell they're going to do about that.
What happens when corporate media unites against one candidate?
I don't really trust any of them because what they want is ratings.
They're serving a customer base, and the advertisers from which they get their money are also serving a customer base.
Yes, Wall Street is powerful.
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they attack you.
Are you all ready for a political revolution?
Let's rock the boat. In fact, let's tip the boat over.
That is the establishment's nightmare.
2/3 of all voters said they were uncomfortable with a socialist candidate for president. What do you say to those voters, sir?
What was the result of that poll? Who was winning?
Let me thank you all. You are the overflow crowd on this beautiful afternoon. Wow.
Yeah.
We are going to be knocking on many, many thousands of doors all over the state. And we have, I believe, the strongest grassroots movement in the country.
It's February 2020, 9 months from Election Day. But the race has already been in motion for more than a year. The Democratic field has narrowed from 21 to 11 candidates, and Bernie is in a tie with 4 other nominees. And that's no small feat. Since he recovered from a heart attack in the fall, the mainstream media has been attempting to write Sanders' political obituary.
So this is a major development in the race. How will it affect who becomes the Democratic nominee?
He had a heart attack.
Yeah, well,
he had a heart attack in the fall. Do you think the American people deserve to know more?
But some would argue that mainstream media has been unfairly dismissing Bernie Sanders since his last presidential campaign in 2016.
Some are sounding the alarm. The headline of Jonathan Chait's piece in New York Magazine reads, "Running Bernie Sanders against Trump would be an act of insanity." Over at The Atlantic, Bernie can't win.
After the heart attack, there was a lot of talk that Bernie Sanders was done, it's over, the campaign's finished.
David Sirota is senior advisor and head speechwriter for Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign. He has a pivotal role in creating the campaign strategy for fighting the media blackout.
Progressive campaigns need to be run as professionally and as ruthlessly as the campaigns that are run by the other side. Well, the Bernie blackout was a term that came up that described how the media weren't really covering the campaign. I think the term also became a catch-all term for the media's specific kind of coverage. But I also want to be very clear. That doesn't mean I think that there wasn't good reporting, good journalism on the campaign trail. What we're really talking about here is, in many cases, cable news and the pundit shows.
And he looked like the angry man in the center of the stage saying, "Get off my lawn."
I think he comes off as mean. I think he's disparaging.
Cable news, there was certainly examples of just open hostility.
Bernie, you're full of it. You're going to be a miserable president.
It could be a framing, it could be a sentence, it could be a way of describing a situation that, again, always tended to look at Bernie Sanders as not really a serious candidate for president.
Whether the mainstream media gets it or not, we have millions of people who have invested into this campaign. We have professions like teachers and nurses who really believe in the senator, workers who work at places like Amazon, everyday people of this nation. They do truly understand who is on their side and who will change the material conditions of their lives. What the American people in this country need, they need somebody that is unabashed and that has the courage and the conviction to stand up for them and to call out the rigging of this system. And that candidate is Senator Bernie Sanders. People are really excited, and there are so many people coming into Iowa from all parts of the country to really support Senator Sanders. The weather may be chilly, but the hearts of the people here in Iowa are very warm, and they are feeling the burn.
The Iowa caucus, the first official contest in the election season. Historically, victories in Iowa lead to momentum that becomes essential to win other states. And just days before voters head to the polls, Bernie Sanders is in the lead, predicted to capture the coveted Iowa momentum.
We've brought 130 volunteers with us this weekend. This is my second weekend coming to Iowa to come knock on doors for Bernie.
We just got a whole fleet here. I've heard there's over 1,700 out-of-state volunteers in Iowa now at this point, the weekend before the caucus.
The campaign works its way through Iowa, making small stops along the way to a large rally in Cedar Rapids.
This platform, it became something super important for me that I feel like I just have to be a part of it.
The reason I believe we win is not because of our TV ads. They're good ads. Not because of the radio ads, not because of the newspaper ads. You know why we're going to win? Because of you.
You can be part of history unfolding, a political revolution, a historic political revolution happening right now.
This is the most important week yet, so I decided to skip classes, neglect my schoolwork, to come out here and, fight for what I believe in.
Thank you all very much.
Bernie Sanders grew up in Brooklyn, the son of poor Jewish immigrants from Poland. At college, he grew from his roots into a political activist. It was the 1960s. Bernie became involved in segregation and anti-Vietnam protest.
I mean, there's pictures of him out there in the 1960s being arrested, chained to an African American because they were protesting racial injustice in Chicago.
He won his first election as an independent by an upset of just 10 votes, beating the Republicans and the Democrats.
The office of mayor of the city of Burlington. The office of mayor of the city of Burlington.
He served 4 terms as mayor of Burlington, Vermont.
Fighting for economic democracy, for the rights of all people, is an idea that is as American as apple pie.
I was a community organizer when I met Bernie, and he spoke, and I thought he embodied everything I ever believed in.
In 1988, he married Jane. As mayor, he took a grassroots approach to media, creating his own talk show and speaking directly with the people of Burlington.
Ordinary citizens feel very hopeless about the future. In Burlington, we have shown that you can stand up to the system, and at least you can win some good victories.
He went on to serve 8 terms in the U.S. House and was elected to the Senate in 2006.
35 years after my original impression of him, he still embodies everything that I ever believed in.
I don't know anybody in my life who has had such, strong views as a young person and been consistent to them their entire lives.
I think that I've never, in my 31 years of running campaigns, ever seen the grassroots support show up for a campaign that I've seen in this campaign. I've been doing this work for 31 years, so I've got long tentacles into the political operative world and folks on the ground. And the unique thing about Bernie and him, the way he's not normally covered on broadcast TV, is making sure that there's ways to reach the electorate. One of the main ways that I do that is through alternative media, like The Hill Rising with Crystal Ball and that crew, where I'm a regular on their show, because there's groups of people out there that want to take in information that's not skewed through the corporate media lens.
All across America, independent journalists and media creators have been reporting outside of the mainstream media.
It's not clear how much they are even aware of their bias.
We have to be building a movement that is bigger than just Bernie Sanders himself.
Without network airtime, they use their own resources to call out the hypocrisy in America's corporate press.
When I was at MSNBC, I saw what many people saw early on, before the primary had even started on the Democratic side, that Hillary Clinton would be a bad candidate.
So though I admire and respect Secretary Clinton deeply, I must say, don't run, Hillary, don't run. But afterwards, the Clinton people called and complained to the MSNBC top brass and threatened not to provide any access during the upcoming campaign.
I was called in by my boss, who said, that was fine, but anything else that you do on Hillary Clinton needs to be submitted to the president of the network.
Now, being a human interested in maintaining my job, I'm certain I did less critical Clinton commentary after that than I maybe otherwise would have.
Mainstream media has a boss. Their boss is not a working class person. The mainstream media isn't owned by the people. It's owned by rich people. And rich people tell them what to say.
The corporate media is there to further the agenda of the establishment, of the oligarchs, because they own it.
Democracy has been stolen from us. It's been hijacked by the very, very wealthy, and it's being held ransom.
In 1982, 90% of media was controlled by 50 companies. Today, the media landscape has changed. AT&T, Comcast, Walt Disney, and Viacom together account for $386 billion in total revenue. Now, only 4 corporations own about 90% of the media landscape.
The daily agenda at any network is driven by its leader.
Ultimately, they're serving a customer base, and the advertisers from which they get their money are also serving a customer base.
Greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities, the El Paso, Las Cruces communities.
In 2018, a viral video was released showing Sinclair Broadcast Group directing its anchors to all fall in line with the same message.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
It was a shocking example to many people that networks have an agenda, and that agenda comes from the top leadership.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
You'd be more informed just by sitting on the couch and drinking a bottle of gin.
A lot of journalists depend for their career on access to the establishment. And a lot of the pundits, which are routinely on cable news and routinely called upon for quotes in mainstream publication articles, depend on that establishment for their own livelihoods.
The demographics of who watches network television, who watches cable television like MSNBC and CNN, it's mostly older people.
Independent media has done so much to help Bernie Sanders fight back, and they've also had this partnership with young people in America.
The revolution will not be televised. Most people know that phrase. So what does that mean? So we can't expect to go to MSNBC, CNN, or any of these major news networks to actually get a breakdown of like what needs to be done to change this world into one that's better for most people. Well, Local 5 is also your local election headquarters. Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders stopping in Des Moines today. Vermont Senator is spending 3 days here in the city. On the stage, he stressed his campaign would be civil and would not attack his fellow candidates. He also hopes the party's primary would stay focused on issues facing the everyday voter. Bernie, 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 Bernie.
I'm gonna be there are our volunteers. let me just say a few words. So my plea to you is to understand a simple political fact. This I believe. If tomorrow night the voter turnout is low, we're going to lose.
People take in their information differently than when I was a young man, when everybody was watching 3 channels. So you have to have alternative ways to talk to the average voter. We're breaking the trends of the way campaigns are normally run. So we're using every resource we can to get out to every voter through every alternative measure of media that we can get to.
The campaign strategy was heavily focused towards online outreach. The Cedar Rapids rally was marketed almost entirely online.
No matter how much there's been a Bernie blackout, we're still going to win because people have still found a way to get the information about our campaign.
Thank you! This is everything we have fought against our entire lives, right, folks? I want to bring out on the stage the co-chair. One of the national co-chairs of Bernie for President campaign. She is a state senator from the state of Ohio. You know her. You love her. Miss Nina Turner!
Iowa's all on you. And only all that we love is on the line. That's all, nothing big. That's all that we love. We cannot judge the success of this nation based on how Wall Street is doing. Wall Street is fine, but Main Street is catching hell. Hello, somebody. But isn't it fabulous? Isn't it wonderful to have a true champion for justice who has already said to Wall Street, I'm coming for your greed. Pharmaceutical industry, I'm coming for your greed. Fossil fuel industry, I'm coming for your greed. But when ordinary people put a little extra on their ordinary, extraordinary things do happen, and we are those ordinary people.
Whether or not the people in Iowa are prepared to stand up and fight for justice. I am here to ask you, very humbly, for your support on caucus night.
The campaign and press both eagerly await the results.
It's been good. I'm excited, hopeful, nervous. So it all comes down to tonight.
Let Showtime know we can do it. I like John.
I'll be happy to talk to them
anytime.
DSM is a burning town. Get up! Get down! DSM is a burning town. Get up! Get down!
Everyone thought Iowa would declare a winner by 10 p.m. But as the hours tick by, reporters and voters realize something's wrong. There's a serious issue involving the reporting of the votes.
Ready? This is our first official explanation from the Iowa Democratic Party. Ready? The integrity of the results is paramount. We have experienced a delay in the results due to quality checks.
I'm going to say, if you win New Hampshire, which you will, this isn't going to happen in New Hampshire because they have an actual primary.
What can you tell us about what happened in terms of reporting results from your precinct?
Well, I think as you just mentioned, the app that we were told to download just hasn't been working.
They were making big bets on Iowa. Who's going to get talked about and in what way between now and New Hampshire? You know, this is very much domino effect.
We had a really good showing, double what I saw in 2016 when I campaigned for Bernie Sanders.
They just don't want to say Bernie won. We don't know exactly what's going to happen tonight. We don't know what's going to happen in the next few minutes.
By midnight, only 2% of the votes have officially been reported, but Mayor Pete nonetheless decides to make a play for the coveted Iowa momentum.
So we don't know all the results. But we know by the time it's all said and done, Iowa, you have shocked the nation.
Pete Buttigieg declares victory in Iowa, but 3 days later, the actual numbers are in, and Bernie makes his own victory speech. Despite getting more votes, the media claims that Pete has won the momentum.
Buttigieg has the razor-thin lead over Sanders in the state delegate equivalents, which actually counts. This afternoon, though, Bernie Sanders declared victory in Iowa based on the raw votes.
Mayor Pete's been declaring a win for days now. Why should people believe your victory speech over his?
Because I got 6,000 more votes. And from where I come, when you get 6,000 more votes, that's generally regarded to be the winner. Yes.
Iowa was a mess, and that unfortunately meant that we didn't get the boost out of winning the most votes in Iowa that would have helped build more momentum.
The data, there was no revolution in terms of turnout. The numbers went down.
The numbers went up with young people and with people of color. That's a great indicator going into states that are a lot more diverse. Sure, more regular white working class people did not vote, but more people of color went and voted for Bernie Sanders. I know that's kind of hard to hear for a lot of people out there who don't like Bernie Sanders, but that's just the facts.
After the messy, unclear results from Iowa, attentions turned to the next major competition, New Hampshire. Despite Bernie's lead, the media finds a way to frame it negatively. Chuck Todd and others framed the narrative that Bernie is polling well below his numbers in 2016, when he beat Clinton by 20%. It's a debatable perspective, because this primary has many more candidates than in 2016. Expectations for such a decisive victory for any of them is absurd.
Despite having any results in Iowa, the candidates are turning their sights to the Granite State for a crucial final push for votes.
The Iowa caucus system had some inherent flaws. Sanders' campaign didn't get the narrative it deserved of coming into New Hampshire.
We are here at Franklin Pierce University in the snow, happily for Bernie. All for Bern.
I'm actually on the basketball team. A couple of my basketball players behind me, too. I want to hear what Bernie has to say.
I think his campaign is a phenomenon that's not really getting the credit for what he's accomplished.
Who's got the power? We got the power! What kind of power? Union power! Who's got the power?
It is because of the kind of grassroots movement that we put together in Iowa, we have here in New Hampshire, and you should know that is going on all over America right now. We are going to end the absurdity of the United States of America being the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right.
What we saw was that Bernie's policy agenda was used to make an argument that Bernie can't be elected president. He's too, radical, et cetera, et cetera.
No other candidate has anything like this sort of digital brown shirt brigade. I mean, except for Donald Trump.
The entire idea of electability is an intangible, almost undefinable idea that the media itself gets to define. And that's a problem.
But the electability conversation is a relatively new addition to Bernie's 2020 campaign. In 2016, the media mostly tried to ignore him.
January 1st, 2015, I think through November 2015, ABC Evening News had us on for 20 seconds.
What was it you did that was so newsworthy? They showed more of the open podium waiting for Donald Trump than ever playing your speeches.
This is a huge crowd.
I think the Bernie blackout is an ideological tendency to ignore his campaign altogether, but especially to ignore any sort of good news around his campaign.
There was a Reuters article, apparently, where the headline was, Buttigieg comes in second, Warren comes in, Klobuchar comes in third, and Warren comes in fourth. Just didn't mention who won.
It's the same progression that the establishment greets many social movements. First, they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they attack you.
Bernie Sanders makes my skin crawl.
He wants free tuition for colleges. A great idea if you think money grows on bongs.
Senator Sanders is not electable.
The media has a laundry list of reasons why Bernie cannot be president. Mainstream media has constantly shifted its reasons. Electability.
There's this narrative that Bernie Sanders is not electable against Donald Trump, which is amazing. And it's amazing how strong that is, how much it's stuck, given that the data just doesn't prove that.
It's not just that Bernie is asking a lot of voters to buy into what I consider radical ideas like free public college, the Green New Deal, Medicare for all.
The media spins health care as Bernie Sanders has an utterly infeasible, pie-in-the-sky plan.
Some might say you are way too far left.
Bernie is a socialist. Bernie is a communist.
This dope once adored the Sandinistas, a toxic bunch of commies. Sanders is so nutty, most kids should be allergic to him.
How can any kind of socialist win a general election in the United States?
Then you have the idea that Bernie can't win because he's a socialist. I mean, the truth is, yes, he's a democratic socialist. He has such a consistency and honesty. And even people who don't even like the idea of socialism, they find him trustworthy and compelling.
Even as Sanders did better and better in the polls, even as he was drawing crowds like a rock star at different rallies, there's always sort of a new counter narrative that was meant to sort of take him down a notch.
The contempt is so strong and so open and so unchecked and so rampant, and there's no accountability.
I think you're disheveled, you're unlikable, and you're pushy.
Any possible narrative that they can create in order to discredit him, they will push, and it works.
The media's specific kind of coverage when they covered Bernie Sanders was, in many cases, coverage that didn't take him seriously and was always kind of sneering and scoffing at him.
This is a movement that we have created since 2015 when the senator ran the first time around. The senator is the total antithesis of President Trump. So he is the one to galvanize a multicultural, multiracial, multi-gendered campaign of people from all walks of life who are really here to stand up against the system and to stand up for what is good, what is right, and what is just.
You know, at a Bernie rally, there's an excitement, an energy of urgency, an energy of what is possible.
I was at Kent State when the kids were felled, and as a grown-up boomer, it's very disenchanting to think that we can't do better, and I know Bernie can. I want the DNC, I want Democrats to get behind him, and I hope that happens.
Bernie Sanders has irrevocably changed the terrain and the conversation of this country. We are going to show this country and the world what New Hampshire can do and what the United States of America can do.
Sanders' rallies have this electric energy to them, and they really make tangible the possibility that a radically different world is possible.
Please give some Bernie 2020 love to National Campaign Surrogate, Dr. Cornel West.
I come from a people who have been terrorized, stigmatized, and traumatized for 400 years, but we have produced figures of great fortitude.
We gonna stay in solidarity together. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what your natural identity is. I don't care what region you are. You a human being. We got a deep Jewish brother named Bernie Sanders who's bringing us together. Do you want a better America?
It just is so clear that the people of the United States want this progressive agenda. The media would do anything to put a halt to that agenda, which really, to me, lifts the veil of like how much corporate sponsorship there is and corporate incentivization in terms of how the media portrays information.
That's a moral and a spiritual dimension. And I thank God my dear brother Bernie Sanders has got the integrity, the courage, the vision. We got to have moral
The energy is so high at one of these things because everyone's just sort of shaking with anticipation. In that situation, when you're really serious about politics, you're not optimistic, you're not pessimistic, you're just hopeful.
2 days before the New Hampshire vote, thousands braved the weather to attend a rally featuring Bernie and some of his biggest surrogates. Cynthia Nixon,
Whose America do you want to live in?
Cornel West, Nina Turner, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
Are you all ready for a political revolution in New Hampshire tomorrow?
This is about our lives. This is about American lives, and it should not be partisan.
I want to talk a little bit about why Bernie. Because Bernie has not committed to what is right when it was popular. Senator Bernie Sanders has spent his entire life fighting for the right thing when it was unpopular. It is hard to stand up and fight for someone you don't know when it's not the popular thing to do, and he has done it his whole damn life. And with that, I am so excited to bring you the candidate, Senator Bernard Sanders.
In case you haven't noticed, there are a lot of people here tonight. In fact, there are 3 times more people here tonight than in any other Democratic rally in New Hampshire. Let's win this thing. Let's transform America.
We'd expect results faster than we did in Iowa, and God bless them, hundreds of people already here in line. They vote for sport here in New Hampshire.
Supporters watch the New Hampshire return slowly report. Most of the evening has Bernie Sanders and Mayor Pete within a couple points of each other. Too close for the networks to call until late into the night.
All right, CNN has a major projection right now. CNN projects that Bernie Sanders will win the New Hampshire Democratic presidential primary.
Victories behind us, popular vote in Iowa, victory here tonight.
Mainstream media seizes the opportunity to raise questions about Sanders' campaign.
So the story of the Sanders campaign so far this year is how much ground he's lost from 4 years ago.
Sanders won this state handily back in 2016 with 60%, and it is notable that he saw nowhere near that level of support this time around.
That's the lowest win that you've ever seen in New Hampshire.
Don't get your hopes up on Bernie yet.
All this, but no one will focus on the fact that Bernie Sanders just won the popular vote in the first 2 states. No candidate in nearly half a century has won the first 2 states by popular vote and not been the nominee. The media downplays the success by pointing out that Iowa and New Hampshire do not really represent America and its diversity. Bernie's supporters are not diverse enough. Viewers of mainstream media constantly hear about the Bernie bro and the idea that a significant portion of his supporters are angry white men.
Around January, February of 2016, we saw kind of a flurry of Bernie bro articles. It's anecdotal evidence presented as statistical proof.
The Bernie Bro. An insufferable, aggressive, self-righteous left-wing activist who refers to everyone who doesn't share his narrow political views as a corporate puppet media whore.
You may have heard the term Bernie Bro this election season, typically young, white, and male.
The Bernie Bro, right? Somebody who's a bit younger, whiter.
It is so insulting for the media to consistently, put out this narrative that all Bernie supporters are these white, racist, sexist men who are saying horrible things to people.
And the Bernie Bros, again, they're pretty obnoxious and they're very sexist.
The most violent, the most misogynistic, the most sexist, the most harmful.
People are mean on Twitter sometimes. This is not an exclusive phenomenon to Bernie Sanders, nor is it a particularly important topic of debate.
If you go online, most likely, you're not going to get into squabbles with people on your side.
If you are still supporting Sanders as opposed to Warren, it's kind of showing your sexism.
I can't vote for him because some of his supporters are rude to me online. like just hearing that, just hearing that, it's ridiculous.
This whole notion of a Bernie Bro is the most blatant, pathetic attempt to try to turn possibly undecided voters off from actually looking into Bernie as their candidate.
Part of the Bernie Bro narrative that's so frustrating is that Sanders is responsible for any and all and every person online. They are somehow extensions of Sanders.
If you say somebody is allowing something, by default, you are saying that they can do something about it.
And he can't.
And he can't.
Not too long ago, I came out as a Bernie Bro, just as my attempt to kind of dispel the notion that all of Bernie's supporters look a certain way and that it's a very weird, cultish following.
We've seen that Bernie actually has had the most diverse coalition.
There is no hard data to support the Bernie Bro myth, so I decided to look for the data and examine it myself. There are as many Bernie supporters online as there are all other candidates combined. I downloaded over 100 million tweets from all the followers of major candidates and analyzed them for their negativity. The data did show that 2% of Bernie supporters' tweets were quite negative. But the thing is that same percentage was true for all the candidates' supporters. There's a phenomenon called frequency illusion. If someone points something out to you, you're going to notice it more. And so because the media points out the nasty 2% of Bernie's supporters, people notice that, and not the nastiness of any other candidate's supporters. And that's how the Bernie Bro myth grows.
Rather than dealing with the substance, you can cherry pick some nasty comment on Twitter and use that as a way to dismiss everything that goes along with Bernie Sanders and his movement.
The Republican strategist Karl Rove used to say that you shouldn't hit your opponent where your opponent is weakest, you should actually hit them where they're strongest. I think it's inarguable that Bernie's greatest strength is actually his supporters. Dedication becomes fanaticism, passion becomes anger, and that's where you started to get all of these stories about how Bernie Sanders supporters were uniquely toxic, uniquely terrible, that they were responsible for behavior that was tantamount to abuse, and that Bernie Sanders needed to disavow them. Over and over again, this line of attack was used. And I think it's very clear that, in fact, this was the Karl Rove strategy in action: transform somebody's greatest strength into their biggest weakness.
Bernie travels to Bakersfield, California, where almost half the population is Latino. He's greeted with an overflow rally that mainstream media fails to cover or mention.
The Senator Sanders campaign coming to Bakersfield and having a rally, talking to us directly about the issues is fantastic.
I just like what he stands up for.
You know, the country's been in need of changes, and I want a different future for my little girls.
I have friends that are LGBTQ, and they don't even know what he's a big supporter of them. He's been doing that since before a lot of us were even born, and he's still doing it now.
When he talks from his heart, and that makes a big difference to me.
What a great country is about is that we care about each other. That your family cares about my family cares about your family, that every family in America has its problems, but we work together to solve them.
He's for us. He's gonna help us make a difference, you know, in this crooked world.
I really like what Bernie stands for in terms of being for the people. And so far, what I've seen, it looks like the government's really been about enriching those that are at the top and not really looking out for the common people.
So whether the establishment wants it or not, we're going to open the door to working people, to young people, to say, come on in, this is your country, vote, participate in the political process. So today, I am here to humbly ask for your support.
With Nevada and its large Latino population up next, coverage of the Bakersfield event is an interesting omission from the national conversation. And then, a new problem for the campaign. Just days before the Nevada caucus, culinary union leaders circulate a healthcare scorecard to their members, stating that Bernie's platform would end union healthcare. The message fails to mention that under Sanders' universal healthcare plan, they would have the same or better coverage.
The state's most influential union says a vote for Sanders is a vote to end health care as they know it.
How would you answer that union member who says, we fought for 5 years to get this health plan. It's a great gold-plated health plan. Why should we give it up for nationalized health care?
You're the one who is at war with the culinary union right here in Las Vegas.
We got more union support than you have ever dreamed of.
It's the Nevada caucus, another crucial early state. With Nevada's large Latino population, this is Bernie's first chance to prove that he's capable of drawing a diverse coalition.
There are so many unknowns when I look at Nevada. To begin with, the polling is infamously off, given the nature of the population.
Nevada's culinary union has been such an influential voice in Nevada politics.
Very important to keep our own health care because we have the best health care in Nevada.
Conflict around the Nevada Culinary Union has flared up in the media.
So when Culinary 226 did come out and criticize Bernie Sanders for Medicare for All, his supporters really attacked them.
A reckless minority of Bernie supporters make threats to the union leaders online, sparking a massive debate on the hostility of Bernie Bros.
One of the big narratives in the race was Bernie's campaign and his supporters are just too mean.
And the vicious attacks that the union said it received.
Are they going to go after him about the bad behavior of Bernie's supporters or not? Is this how they do things in Denmark?
And I think Bernie has a lot of questions to answer here.
If you looked at much of the news coverage was telling you that the real thing people should be worried about is the appropriateness of the tone of some Bernie Sanders supporters. It's an example of a completely manufactured narrative. It's not to excuse, this or that terrible tweet or this or that, terrible social media posting. It's only to say that it's the rough and tumble of a campaign, and when you are exclusively trying to scandalize one campaign's situation, and you're illustrating an actual attitude and bias that is not fair and is not objective.
The Bernie Bro narrative dominates coverage. Can Sanders' campaign overcome this latest attempt to derail his momentum? With voting underway in Nevada, Bernie heads to Texas, a state which months ago had him polling in single digits. Bernie decides to rally and watch the Nevada results in a heavily Latino-populated San Antonio.
You're gonna be going inside. It's moving, it's moving, it's moving. Let's go!
The mainstream media is saying we can't get things done, saying that it's all too extreme, when our positions are moderate. Our positions are not extreme, they're just painted as extreme to really prevent them from happening.
What he says is what we all should be doing, is caring about people, not the bottom dollar. His affinity to the working class has perked my interest. I'm a union member. I have been for 20 years. Unions have things that they negotiate. They negotiate wages, they negotiate the working conditions, they negotiate pension, they negotiate health care. Take health care off the table.
Senator Sanders says he wants to improve health care benefits for unions, but this union is specifically saying they want to keep their private health insurance, and we're hearing that from unions across the country.
There's one thing that makes the establishment media, establishment Democrats and Republicans really nervous, and that's every time Bernie Sanders starts doing really well. Because the more better he does, the more everybody worries about them not being relevant because they're falling in line with everybody else, whether it's the corporate media or whether it's the establishment.
There is real concern right now that Bernie Sanders is so far ahead in the lead.
here in Nevada, and then might go to South Carolina, further fracture that Joe Biden support among African Americans, sweep up a ton of delegates in California, currently where he's leading by a large margin in the polls, and then become essentially unstoppable.
We are at the Bernie Sanders rally waiting for him to come on, and I'm really excited because it is a caucus night, so we get to see the results coming in while we're here, and hopefully we'll get to celebrate a win with Mr. Bernard Sanders tonight. I think the way that the mainstream media has portrayed Bernie and his supporters is extremely unfair. There's that Bernie bro stereotype where clearly I am a Hispanic female, I am not a white male, and really Bernie has proven to have a very, very diverse supporter base.
Hey Bernie, ¿qué pasó? Thought I was a relato. Hey,
As Bernie's momentum grows, it's not just mainstream media that's concerned. It's President Trump and his supporters as well.
Say the Pledge of Allegiance to the republic for which we stand. Okay, people wake up. Red, white, blue, you know? Anyone who votes Democrat, they can't be a Christian because it's pro-abortion. Okay, and it's anti-American, it's pro-socialism, it's pro-homosexual. I'm not judging them, even though I'm ordained, you know, to call evil out for evil.
Woo! USA! USA!
That's awesome. I feel the energy. I see the fire in your eyes. And I love it. I love it. How many of you already voted for Senator Sanders?
All of the oppressors are afraid of this campaign more than any other campaign. You know why they're afraid? Because they know it's not about me, it's not just about Bernie, it's not just about one of you, it's not just about them, it's about us coming together.
Election returns from Nevada come in swiftly. A reporter is heard gasping as she reports that Bernie is winning in a landslide.
These, again, are people who work on the Strip. The majority are Latino, and they are clearly, at least from eyeballing it, strongly in favor of Bernie Sanders, with Joe Biden coming in second.
And now I'm delighted to bring you some pretty good news. I think all of you know we won the popular vote in Iowa. We won the New Hampshire primary. And according to 3 networks in the AP, we have now won the Nevada caucus.
NBC News projects Bernie Sanders, the winner in Nevada. Brand new breaking news numbers coming right out of Nevada.
Don't tell anybody. I don't want to get them nervous. We're going to win the Democratic primary election.
The happiest person right now, it's about 1:15 Moscow time. This thing is going very well for Vladimir Putin. I promise you. He's probably staying up watching us right now. How you doing, Vlad?
If another candidate had won Nevada, it would have been a celebration on cable TV news. Instead, it was like a funeral.
The cable news coverage is not dominated by how Sanders had built a diverse winning coalition in Nevada, but rather, can anyone stop Sanders?
That, again, illustrated what was really at work on a day-to-day basis on cable TV news.
No one else is as hungry, angry, enraged, and determined as Sanders voters. Democrats need to sober up and figure out what the hell they're going to do about that.
You have to remember, it wasn't just at that moment in Nevada. It was like, oh, this is what you guys have been talking about for much of the campaign. Now it's on full display for everybody to see.
The frustration from mainstream media news is as clear as Bernie's Nevada win. On primetime air, Chris Matthews lets his disgust overwhelm his judgment.
I'm reading last night about the fall of France in the summer of 1940, and the General Renault calls up Churchill and says, "It's over."
Chris Matthews compares Bernie's win to World War II and the rise of Nazism.
And Churchill said, "How can it be? You got the greatest army in Europe. How can it be over?" He said, "It's over."
With winning the popular vote in the first 3 states, Bernie is surging. But mainstream media tries to suppress this narrative in a pattern that's been going on for years.
This power apparatus that we're living in, I mean, it is well built. It is a well-functioning machine.
We're always told that CNN and MSNBC are the anti-Trump channels. They're also the anti-Bernie channels.
Ed Schultz was told not to cover Bernie Sanders, not to cover him during the primary in 2015-16. He covered him anyway. He was fired for that.
When Bernie Sanders was announcing that he was going to be a candidate for the nomination of the Democratic Party in Burlington, Vermont, I was the only cable host between Fox, MSNBC, and CNN that was there live to cover it. I go to Bernie Sanders' house that afternoon, an interview in the backyard, about a 15-minute interview. The grandkids are running around. It's a big day for the Sanders family. He's going to announce that he's running for president. We're going to carry it live later on in the day, and we're going to run this one-on-one tape with Bernie. 3,000 people are there on Lake Champlain. It's 5 minutes to air, and I get a phone call from Phil Griffin. "You're not covering this." I said, "Phil, Bernie Sanders is announcing he's running for president. He's going to be a president." "I don't care. You're not covering this." We were told that we had to cover something down in Texas that was totally meaningless.
That's the history of MSNBC and their journalism. If you tell the truth about progressives or if you tell the truth about a war, you're going to get fired.
The fix was in with the mainstream media. The fix was in with managing the news and shutting down Bernie Sanders. And it wasn't until he started matching the Clintons and raising money that he became, well, we gotta cover this guy.
The media wants to generate clicks, it wants sensational stories, but it also wants, for example, to maintain friends in high places.
I worked on the Phil Donahue show at MSNBC in 2002 and 2003. We were canceled for political reasons 3 weeks before the invasion of Iraq, saying, "Oh, we wasn't getting the ratings we had hoped for." And God bless whistleblowers, someone inside NBC News leaked documents. NBC did not want an anti-war voice on the air.
They were also owned by General Electric at the time, which was a defense contractor, and they stood to make billions, if not, more off the war.
Let me tell you something. You say the wrong thing, you don't get advertisers. You don't get advertisers, you're not on the air very long. The mainstream media in this country is about one thing. That's making money.
With a convincing win in Nevada, Bernie heads to Austin. A rally of over 12,000 faithful supporters convene to celebrate Bernie Sanders and prepare for Super Tuesday, where Texas, among 13 other states, will vote. After years of being insulted and dismissed, Bernie Sanders' movement has won the popular vote in the first 3 states.
China, if you want North Korea, go there and live as communists. But don't come here and dream of your violent overthrow of America, because all you'll get is your political guts stomped out, you commies!
It's pretty disheartening to see the way that our political system is being reported. Every time Bernie takes a win in any of these states, they're completely not even trying to hide the fact that they're undermining his wins.
There's not a lot of attention that's being paid to his victories. That's kind of impacting his momentum.
While thousands of Sanders supporters packed the Austin rally, Mainstream media reaches millions of viewers, raising the concerns that if Sanders comes out of Super Tuesday with the most delegates, he would be unstoppable.
I cannot believe how many people are here. It's amazing. Now, I've been hearing, the establishment is getting a little bit nervous about our campaign. Their nightmare is when they see, not only in Austin, but all over this country, millions of people standing up for justice. That is what this campaign is about. Yes, Wall Street is powerful. The drug companies are powerful. The insurance companies are powerful. The military-industrial complex is powerful. But the major problem we face are the limitations of our imagination and what we believe as a nation we can become.
While the Austin rally is in full swing, cable news pays little attention. Instead, they circle their talking points around a 60 minutes promo clip of an interview with Senator Sanders that will air later that night. The clip features Bernie Sanders expressing that not everything Fidel Castro did was bad. In an interview from 1985, he cites Castro's literacy program.
He educated the kids, gave them health care, totally transformed the society.
News outlets shift to a different narrative. Sanders is not electable because of his complimentary views of Castro's literacy program.
There was a couple dynamics at play. I mean, there was an effort to blow up anything Bernie said that was controversial into an enormous controversy. I mean, Bernie got asked one question about Fidel Castro. It became a 4-day news story.
Shouldn't we judge dictators by the violation of human rights and not by any of their alleged achievements?
If you only tune into the news, you might think that Bernie Sanders was campaigning for Fidel Castro. I mean, he was literally on 60 Minutes and he was asked a question about it, answered a question in a very similar way, by the way, that Barack Obama answered the question. It was like some huge controversy.
There's a saying here in South Florida by many Cubans that they say, Castro may have given us health care and education, but he didn't give us breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
They're attacking your comment as absolutely unacceptable, singing the praises of a murderous tyrant.
It's the 10th Democratic debate, 4 days before the South Carolina primary. The latest narrative frames Sanders as a radical communist sympathizer, someone far from the party's current core message and comfort zone. Bernie's contentious relationship with the DNC is not new.
There's been a war in the Democratic Party, and the donor class are on one side, and the progressives and the base are on the other side.
In 2016, the moderate side was heavily favored when Hillary Clinton received nearly all the superdelegate support before primary voting had even begun.
Unpledged delegates exist really to make sure that party leaders and elected officials don't have to be in a position where they are running against grassroots activists. And so we separate out those unpledged delegates to make sure that there isn't competition between them.
I'm not sure that answer would satisfy an anxious young voter.
CNN hosted a town hall featuring Hillary Clinton, and then CNN contributor, now DNC interim chair Donna Brazile, actually gave the Clinton campaign an advance notice of a question that they were going to ask.
And that is obviously biasing the debate because Bernie Sanders didn't have any questions in advance.
Democratic National Committee is very happy with corporate journalists running Democratic debates.
Sanders, our latest NBC News Wall Street Journal poll released yesterday, 2/3 of all voters said they were uncomfortable with a socialist candidate for president. What do you say to those voters, sir?
What was the result of that poll? Who was winning?
The question's to you.
Well, the question was that I was winning, and I think by a fairly comfortable margin. Mike mentioned that.
The corporate wing of the Democratic Party, the establishment wing, is represented by one pundit after another. The progressive wing almost never gets to speak. What many in the Democratic Party establishment fear is not that Bernie couldn't beat Trump. It's that Bernie would beat Trump transform the Democratic Party and transform the country.
With Bernie leading in the polls, Chris Matthews encourages the other candidates to attack the frontrunner. The Stop Sanders movement is on full display.
This one feels, because of the Bloomberg factor, feels like a big moment that we can predict it's going to be a big moment. Good or bad, which way it'll go, we don't know. Does it feel like that to you?
Yeah, and I hope that the candidates who have been telegraphing their punches against Sanders, Senator Sanders, are actually going to deliver them.
Can Americans trust that a Democratic Socialist president will not give authoritarians a free pass?
And that's why Russia is helping you get elected so you'll lose to him.
Imagine spending the better part of 2020 with Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump. Think about what that will be like for this country.
What began as a blackout, and then, first they ignored him, then they laughed at him, then they attacked him. And the attacks really accelerated when it became clear Bernie could be the nominee.
You can't do it. You cannot talk about Fidel Castro's literacy programs. You just can't. Not in American politics, and you shouldn't be able to. That ain't cool, not just with former Republicans. That ain't cool with South Carolina voters. That ain't cool with Democrats.
The race turns to South Carolina. Mainstream media argues that the candidate who takes South Carolina will be in the driver's seat to win the nomination. A new state and a new media narrative.
These southern states that are considered locked up for Biden in terms of the black vote.
Nobody was questioning the fact that Joe Biden had lied on numerous occasions about being involved in the civil rights movement as a frontline organizer, which he was not. And also about engaging in civil disobedience against Nelson Mandela's imprisonment in apartheid South Africa. Those were two blatant lies that Joe Biden perpetrated, and yet he was never asked, not in the debates or any interviews by pundits about these lies.
If he can lie to black people about getting arrested, going to see trying to see Nelson Mandela, if he can lie time and time again over the years, and people not completely oust this guy and disqualify him, and they instead say, yeah, he's our candidate, he's our guy, Uncle Joe, we believe in him. If that happens, then right now we're living in a reality where the facts are not the priority.
NBC News is now projecting that former Vice President Joe Biden has won a decisive victory in the South Carolina Democratic primary.
Heading into a state like South Carolina, the odds were stacked against us. Biden basically, in many ways, got a pass on his record. Bernie would periodically bring up past votes that Biden had taken. He said he didn't write the bankruptcy bill that was literally his bankruptcy bill. At one point, he sort of said that he had always been against the Iraq War. At another point, he just denied that he ever pushed to cut Social Security. I mean, these are just blatant lies. I mean, they're just verifiable, demonstrable lies that really were not fact-checked at all. You could criticize our campaign for not more intensely and repeatedly pushing that message, but there's also a media culpability here, which part of the job of the media is to actually legitimately fact-check these things. There are objective facts and truth, and in a lot of ways, the media did not do its job to actually make sure that the conversation that was happening on the campaign trail was rooted in fact. I mean, there is a referee role that the media just refused to play. The media couldn't bring itself to simply state a fact.
South Carolina is when we saw the big shift in the media narrative. We saw it shift from a very likely Sanders presidency to it's all over. Biden has captured the popular imagination and spirit of the American voter. He has crushed it.
48 hours before Super Tuesday, Sanders' campaign commits to an aggressive rally schedule throughout California.
We're going to see here that Bernie has the power to win this election, and it will be undeniable.
There's a political revolution happening in the streets. The media is going to have to acknowledge it at some point. There's only so much that they can do to hide and obstruct the real fact.
Bernie's a socialist, and you know what socialism is. Communism. We're going to be Russia. All right, kitten, relax. Bernie is a democratic socialist. And so am I. The only way Russia is if we get 4 more years of this lunatic wannabe dictator.
Let's keep exporting, exporting. Let's fight the power. What do you say? Fight the power. Hey!
Within 48 to 72 hours of Super Tuesday, the media began bringing on trusted party folks and started really ringing the alarm bell about Sanders' candidacy.
Sanders is, just may well have this thing locked down.
Well, unless something fundamentally changes, and that would mean Bernie Sanders' vote share would have to drop precipitously, and I don't think we see any evidence of that. Or somebody, and I think at this point it's more likely to have to be one person than two, emerges. He's going to exit Super Tuesday with, if not an insurmountable pledged delegate lead, a significant one.
We are a multi-generational, multi-racial, grassroots movement.
So for you moderates, you have to form a coalition now. Not that you'll take my advice, but I think the moderates should coalesce behind one person.
It's 24 hours before Super Tuesday. The question remains, is there an anti-Bernie bias in the media and the Democratic Party?
It's just been sort of a whiplash period for all of us following the Biden campaign. There were a lot of folks on the Biden campaign who didn't think they'd even be around for Super Tuesday.
Out of the public eye, Pete and Amy fly to Dallas, Texas to meet up with Joe Biden for a scheduled rally just 24 hours before Super Tuesday. Beto joins Amy and Pete for a Biden rally, where they shock the world with their abrupt departure from the race to endorse Joe Biden.
Ladies and gentlemen, el próximo presidente de los Estados Unidos, Joe Biden. Let's do it for Joe.
I'm delighted to endorse and support Joe Biden for president.
Today, I am ending my campaign and endorsing Joe Biden for president.
Bernie is blindsided. The photo op is national news for the next 24 hours leading up to the Super Tuesday vote.
Establishment candidates all suddenly got in line behind Joe Biden. That's a huge amount of power marshaled for him. Between South Carolina and Super Tuesday, there was also an enormous amount, tens of millions of dollars of free media coverage for Biden that was almost entirely positive. That played a huge role. And I think that was the wave that much of the establishment media, the corporate media, the billionaire-owned media was waiting for.
In just a matter of hours, voters in 14 states begin the process of heading to the polls for Super Tuesday.
Super Tuesday is the most crucial day so far in the Democratic race for the White House. 14 states vote and American Samoa vote, a third of the delegates up for grabs.
I support Senator Sanders because he doesn't take the status quo for given. He doesn't say that's okay. He says, you know what? No, it's not. Let's rock the boat. In fact, let's tip the boat over. What happened recently with the endorsements of Klobuchar and Buttigieg and O'Rourke, they all support Biden now. It's like they're trying to tell us, hey, everybody, Biden's the one. Forget about kooky Sanders. What he says is crazy. Don't vote for him.
I did a long night to go. Joe Biden has every right to be happy, optimistic, and confident at this point in the night. Stay with us for several more hours. We'll see how it goes. At this moment, Joe Biden is now the leader in the national delegate race.
The Fox News Decision Desk can now project that former Vice President Joe Biden will win the state of Alabama, racking up his third victory of the night.
I think we have a new call. We do from the state of Arkansas, Minnesota. Joe Biden, the projected winner.
Joe Biden will come out with a vote victory in Texas.
Joe Biden has bounced back, and the path doesn't look any easier for his top competitor, Senator Bernie Sanders.
It's been pretty disgusting how
the entire establishment has banded together to kind of drown out his message.
I think it's not okay. It's insulting. It's demeaning. It's degrading.
Joe Biden's already had the night he needs. If Joe Biden leaves Super Tuesday with more delegates than anybody else, it will be nearly impossible for Sanders to stop him.
You know, we faced a uniquely uphill climb. We're going up against a vice president in a political system in which vice presidents essentially never lose the nomination of their party when they seek it. Look, I think we could have done a better job of consistently contrasting with Joe Biden to make clear what the primary election choice was really all about in very explicit terms. There were strategic considerations. There was a media environment that said anytime you bring up anything even mildly contrastive, you're a horrible human being and you're hurting the party's unity.
CNN analyst Gloria Borger put it in a way that I thought was kind of perfect. She said the waters parted for Joe Biden. She said he didn't even do anything to part those waters, which gets at the passive nature of the way that the kind of establishment kind of walked him to the nomination.
The history of the Democratic Party and its primaries is a history of candidates really, really contrasting with each other. I mean, I know there are people out there, oh my God, it was the most negative primary I've ever seen in my life. It's like, you must have been asleep for the last 50 years. That is not the way politics works. That is not the history of America.
The reason Bernie Sanders doesn't identify as a Democrat is because he believes that the capitalist class essentially has two parties at its disposal. It's working people ought to have at least one.
Younger millennials and Zoomers have come of age at a time where our politics is deeply cynical. They see more critically the flaws of the Republican establishment, but also the Democratic establishment. And so even though they are progressive by and large in their values, that doesn't mean that they're going to be Democratic Party loyalists.
For the past 25 years, about 35% of Americans identify as independent. Despite such a large independent voting bloc, there's great pressure on voters to only support the bigger parties.
So there's the Democrats and the Republicans, and it's one major force against another major force. It's not very complicated.
A vote for a third party is typically considered throwing away a vote. More than half of American independents end up voting for one of the two big parties.
The vote blue no matter who, it's so perfect. They're so out of touch and ineffective that they don't even understand that that's the most alienating name. Like, if they actually wanted people to vote blue no matter who, they wouldn't use that PR name. You're wearing this, like, tribalism and lack of any moral or political imagination on your sleeve. Like, we know that's what you think, but you really should have a different mantra.
I'm opposed to the hashtag blue no matter who because it brings us back into these lesser of two evil arguments, and we end up supporting corporate Democrats who, except in the areas of identity politics, vote no differently from their Republican counterparts.
Having two parties who are in contention with each other at all times makes for really good television.
A week and a half ago, Bernie's march to the nomination was strong.
You cannot beat Trump with the same old kind of politics. What we need is a new politics that brings working class people into our political movement.
It's also pretty enlightening to see just how the great lengths that people would go to sort of make sure that things don't change, that the status quo remains the same.
A shell-shocked Sanders campaign goes into overdrive in an attempt to win the coveted swing state of Michigan.
What a difference a week makes!
The polls have flipped since Super Tuesday, and Sanders' campaign is desperately looking for a lifeline of encouraging results. The March 10th primary, 6 states vote. Michigan is the largest prize.
What I want to do now is something different than I've done before, because today is a special day for me. Because I want to introduce somebody who is a hero for me. He is one of the transformative figures in modern American history. Let me just say to the Reverend Jackson, it is one of the honors of my life to be supported by a man who has put his life on the line for the last 50 years fighting for justice.
I stand with Bernie Sanders today because he stood with me. I stand with him because he's never lost his taste for justice for the people. I stand with him because he stands with you. Thank you, Jesse!
And I want to talk a little bit because in 1984, Reverend Jackson delivered a speech known as the David and Goliath speech. And he said, it's time for a new course, a new coalition of new leadership, a choice, a chance.
The campaign arrives in Cleveland, where it's scheduled to have an election night party to receive the results. But something even more disruptive is on the horizon.
We got here early so we can stand in line, and as we were walking through the parking garage, someone said, hey, it's canceled.
It was a Sanders rally canceled due to concerns over the coronavirus outbreak. There were a couple reported cases here in Ohio.
We're super sad. We were really stoked about this. I'm kind of an introvert, so to come out here with so many people was a big deal for me. I was excited to be a part of this movement and, show my kids how to be an active citizen.
Tonight, for the first time, the coronavirus is forcing candidates to call off rallies. 6 states are holding primaries and caucuses today. Joe Biden has won 11 of the past 16 contests and now leads Bernie Sanders by almost 100 delegates.
Joe Biden is on a roll.
You see the Biden blue on the map, 10 wins for the former vice president.
I think tonight's definitely a should-win night for Bernie. I don't want to say that it's an all-or-nothing thing, but I think that the media is trying to make it seem like it's a bigger deal.
If Bernie can't pull off a win there in Michigan, and the path forward is very, very hard, what happens to that campaign? At some point, does someone talk to him and say, listen, we have to rally around the nominee?
And take a look at this. CNN now projects Joe Biden is the winner in Michigan. 125 delegates are at stake. Joe Biden is the Democratic presidential primary winner in Michigan. So far tonight, he has won Michigan, Mississippi, and Missouri. 3 important states, very significant wins for the former vice president. Jake and Dana, this is what Biden was really hoping for.
Even though it's difficult and exhausting and saddening, I know that we just have to keep moving forward and that there's always more to do. I'm crying. There was a point where we actually had a little bit of hope that Bernie could win this.
I think Bernie Sanders is done.
Yeah.
If I was him, I'd probably go ahead and drop out tomorrow and let's.
You think tomorrow?
Joe Biden will be the nominee. He's the presumptive nominee now after tonight, clearly.
Yeah.
I think Bernie's gone. I think it's done. Let's go.
Coronavirus has affected the election primarily by shutting it down. There are no more rallies. There's no more canvassing.
Democrats now have a reason to put all of democracy on hold and basically say we've got our guy and the coronavirus crisis has shut everything down and it's selfish for Bernie to even stay in the race.
Coronavirus has brought an extreme urgency to the Sanders message.
Feeling is that you cannot simply give $50 billion to the airline industry. And if you're going to bail out tourism, if you're going to bail out hotels, etc., what you have to do is make sure that that money is going to protect working people.
And as you see right now during this crisis, that they have mechanisms in place to save the economy, to save the corporations, but there's no mechanisms in place to save people. Right now, immediately you need $1 trillion to Wall Street. Boom, 2 trillion, 3 trillion, $1 trillion a day will give it to you. Hey, we need $2,000 for a taxpayer. We just can't seem to get that done.
While he assesses his campaign, Bernie turns his focus to the COVID stimulus package.
And now I find that some of my Republican colleagues are very distressed. They're very upset that somebody who's making $10, $12 an hour might end up with a paycheck for 4 months more than they received last week. Oh my God, the universe is collapsing.
The coronavirus crisis and the economic crisis that it has caused has led a lot of people to start demanding the emergency implementation of Bernie Sanders' platform.
Every inch of Brookdale Hospital Medical Center in Brooklyn now inundated with those suffering from COVID-19.
As the pandemic rages on, a news story, completely ignored by all major news outlets, is revealed by independent journalists.
So why don't you tell us what happened?
We were alone, and it was the strangest thing. There was no exchange, really. His hands were on me and underneath my clothes.
The coronavirus pandemic has all but shut the 2020 Democratic primaries down. With near constant media attention on the virus, there's one new election story the mainstream media refuses to tell. Independent journalist Katie Halper breaks the story on her weekly podcast. She interviews a former staffer for Biden in the early 90s. The victim alleges sexual assault.
And then he went down my skirt, but then up inside it.
I wanted someone who doesn't have such a record as a Sanders supporter to tell the story, because I thought I wanted to make sure people didn't think I was politicizing it, or, that this wasn't a totally honest story, which it is.
I looked up to him. He was like my father's age. He was this champion of women's rights. In my eyes, I have no platform. I am no one.
I believe her. I spoke to her brother and her friend, both of whom remember her telling about the incident at the time, but no one else will tell her story.
Tara Reade had a very hard time getting her story told, vetted, shared at all.
You see, there's a powerful club here in this town, and you're not in it, and neither is Tara. I thought Tara deserved a full vetting and a fair hearing from a mainstream outlet. But as I reached out to mainstream folks that I know to see if they were interested in breaking this bombshell story, I heard back crickets. Nothing. No one seemed to want to touch it.
And you can bet that if the shoe were on the other foot and you had a similarly credible accuser of Bernie Sanders, there's no doubt that she would have no trouble whatsoever getting tons of coverage. So it's an incredibly powerful example of the way that this ideological bias works to help the anointed candidate, Joe Biden, and you just see this glaring hypocrisy from people who would use the hashtag #BelieveWomen, who would use the hashtag #MeToo, and yet with Tara Reade, they find every excuse in the book to try to not take her allegations seriously.
Instead of immediately reporting Tara Reade's story, pundits continued to turn out anti-Sanders reporting. Mainstream media outlets delayed covering Tara Reade's story until much later, causing the allegation to have no real impact on the primary race. Weeks passed by with continual pressure on Bernie to leave the race.
Last I heard, people in a democracy have a right to vote, and they have a right to vote for the agenda that they think can work for America, especially in this very, very difficult moment. We are assessing our campaign, as a matter of fact, where we want to go forward. What I am very worried about
is your plan is
that
to
people cannot
stay in,
afford
yes?
Your
plan is to
stay. Said that we are well, for the fourth time.
You're assessing.
We are assessing.
Okay, all right.
We are assessing our campaign.
It's heartbreaking to see him not throw a knockout punch at the debates.
They're going to have to look at the lessons from this year and figure out how to form a coherent left movement that not only has the right ideas, but is ultimately serious about power.
On April 8th, Bernie Sanders suspends his presidential campaign.
Again, I'm not saying that we didn't make mistakes. I'm not saying that we ran a perfect campaign, but I am saying that anybody who pretends that this was a fair contest is just not being truthful. We were up against a media that felt existentially threatened by the agenda of Bernie Sanders, and all of that power was brought to bear against us. And that is a real dynamic, and that will be a real dynamic for any candidate who champions the same agenda moving forward.
Because if there's one thing that we learned in this campaign, it is how powerful mainstream media still really is, how much sway their narrative setting has over the public discourse.
Jeff Winchell performed a final analysis of the amount of coverage MSNBC gave Bernie Sanders throughout the campaign. In the early portion where he was the frontrunner, the other candidates were mentioned distinctly more. There are only 2 moments when Bernie received more coverage than other candidates: after his Super Tuesday loss and the day after he suspended his campaign. It's a glaring example of how the mainstream media chose to emphasize his campaign's problems and to undermine his successes. The campaign is over, but despite this loss, his entire grassroots movement makes it clear that a new generation is willing to stand up against traditional power structures in America.
I think there is an exciting trend of new alternative media.
Independent media is on the rise. People are able to see the truth about different figures, whether it be negative or whether it be positive.
We're going to have to build a movement of all of us that is bigger than just Bernie Sanders himself.
People have to remain engaged. They have to re-engage more. We have to deal with electoral politics, and you have to be part of it.
A few years ago, I had to watch my mother lose the fight against lung cancer. And during that whole time, when she should have just been focused on getting well, there was that added stress and pain of the medical bills. The whole reason I'm out here in, rain, sleet, or snow is Medicare for all.
Environmental justice, a Green New Deal, not just being a transition away from fossil fuels, but investing in those communities directly impacted by that transition.
The inequality in this country, the wealth inequality, the racial inequality.
He's for free education. I think it's for a smarter future and a healthier future.
I have a pre-existing condition, and I don't want the health insurance industry to overcharge me just so that I can breathe decently.
If you think that healthcare, Medicare for all, being accessible to folks is radical, that public education should extend beyond K through 12 is radical, then yeah, I'm also radical.
The major challenge we face is not only a redistribution of wealth, which is important, but a redistribution of power, making the average American feel, this is my country, this is a democracy. I can shape the future. The people don't feel that now. They sit down, they watch the tube for 40 or 50 hours a week, they hold their nose, they vote for the lesser of 2 evils. Now that to me is the major problem. And once we can begin to deal with that problem, I think other things will follow.